We're living in a world right now where children are more used to opening a pouch or a packet of crisps than they are peeling a banana.
70% of their calories that a child is eating today is from a factory, industrially manufactured, ultra-processed foods.
At some point, we're going to wake the hell up and realize that this is just like a modern-day cigarette.
The worst foods that you think so many people are consuming that they think are healthy, which are actually really, really unhealthy for us.
There is some loophole that allows them to use the word fruit. These are not fruit.
They try and market this crap to kids. This is not fit for human consumption. You know, it's on the front. It doesn't even say the word bread.
We have made it so food is easier to chew, easier to bite, less bites per swallow.
People are destroying their taste buds where they can't even enjoy the taste of plain water.
It's everything a child would want. Why would they not want something with a cartoon image?
They want you to get them hooked on super processed, sugary, fake food. They want that.
This is getting out of control.
Ultra-processed food has become so normalized in our culture that we barely stop to think about what we're actually eating. Everything from cheese that doesn't actually contain dairy, fruit yogurt without any real fruit, and just bread that doesn't even mold doesn't sit quite right. Somewhere along the way, our food started getting reimagined and then replaced right under our noses. Now, so many everyday staples are designed to look and feel familiar, comforting even, but they're really just highly engineered imitations of what food used to be. And honestly, it makes you wonder, are we even eating food anymore? And the scariest part, our children have become the test subjects, as ultra-processed foods now make up 70% of kids' diets. For us parents, the straws, sticks, pouches, and powders have always seemed like quick and convenient, maybe even healthy options. But these oversweetened and mushy snacks aren't what the deceptive marketing strategies might lead you to believe. And listen, I'm not about to stand here on my soapbox saying that I'm better than Go-Go fruit pouches or fishy crackers, but the food we're dealing with today is on a whole new level of processing, and that should be questioned. So today we're going to get deep in the weeds of the ultra-processed world and find out what these foods are doing to us, why our kids can't stop eating them, and if ultra-processed foods are actually the worst thing since sliced bread. First things first, I need to address the sensitivity of this subject because kids' diets can quickly turn into a conversation of snobbery where health elitism takes over. I'm not a doctor nor a nutritionist. Can you believe it? So please don't take any health advice from me. I'm just here to share some information that I found and share how I'm choosing to navigate this new world where we have to question the food that we're feeding our children. One last little asterisk, I need to address the fact that health claims change like every decade. So the information that I'm talking about today can easily be proven wrong as new research comes out. Speaking from personal experience, you know that I am a big documentary junkie, and with that, I've watched pretty much every health documentary that's available anyway. And one thing that I know to be true after years of watching them is that they often contradict each other and twist the narrative to fit their hypothesis, so we just need to be skeptical about any new health claims. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about how children's diets have shifted towards the unnatural.
I'm an American mom. I live in France. We don't have this in France. And I just got back from the grocery store with my 2.5-year-old daughter, and the things that I saw were shocking. More SpongeBob on yogurts and another cotton candy flavored yogurt. Is this normal? I grew up in the US. I lived here until literally 4 years ago. I'm a registered dietitian. I've done a lot of stuff in stores, and maybe it's just like reverse culture shock, but I really don't remember this level of crazy processed food.
The kids' food industry has slowly been transforming into a processed food monopoly, where most of the food is now ultra-processed, also known as UPF. Billy Roberts, senior analyst of food and drink at market research firm Mintel, says that there were 4 times more product launches in the baby and toddler food aisle in 2018 than in 2005. And now, an estimated 70% of baby food in the US is ultra-processed. Which sounds crazy, but makes sense when they tell us that babies aren't ready for real food when they're coming off of milk, and so you need an in-between transition of food for them. This isn't necessarily true, and it's something I won't get into in this video, but there is a new wave of baby-led weaning where you do give kids real food, but in safe forms. But the fact still stands that most food advertised to babies and toddlers is ultra-processed. As a result, children's diets have adjusted. As this survey shows, approximately 85% of children ages 2 to 3 consumed at least one serving of salty snack foods, sweet sweetened beverages, desserts, or sweets on the survey day. And these numbers aren't just because of the abundance of UPFs designed specifically for toddlers' needs. In today's world, where dual-income households are often a necessity, it's just that much harder to prioritize healthy meals because we don't have time for them. COVID also played a part in this as snack consumption rose during this time. With kids at home during much of the COVID lockdown and health on the minds of parents, some shifts occurred in kids' snacking habits. Among households with kids, 53% report an increase in snacking since the pandemic, compared to only 28% for households without kids. And with that, this wouldn't be a conversation about healthy food if we didn't mention the health food tax, and that a lot of people just can't afford healthy food.
We know unprocessed blueberries and nuts are a more nutritious snack than chocolate and sweets, but these cost me a fortune. And for the same money, I bought these, and these, and these, and these, and these, and these. And I still had a bit of change left over.
While it is still possible to eat well on a budget, low-income households often lack the time needed to prepare healthy meals. Healthy food only becomes affordable when you actually have the time to cook it from scratch, not just buy the pre-made healthy options. And so it's more financially realistic to just buy the cheap ultra-processed foods. If you couldn't already tell from this video, I'm someone who tries to work towards improving my health, and that includes my skin. I've mentioned before that I really started taking care of my skin over the past year-ish, especially as I'm entering my 30s. I want to try my best to prevent damage and just treat my skin well. With that, over the past months, I've been using the FAQ 202 by Foreo, a new generation of silicone face masks. Red light therapy is something I've been really interested in for a long time now because it's low effort and high reward. You can see in this study here from 2023 that the effect on their patients included a 15% decrease in depth of crow's feet wrinkles, 6.8% decrease in cheek roughness, and a 12.5% increase in skin elasticity. So we're not messing around here. What I really love about the FAQ 202 is how easily it integrates into my life. It seriously takes up nearly no time, as I just put it on when I start my workday and before I've done my skincare, and then I let it run for the predetermined 15 minutes, get all my work done, and then it automatically turns off when it's done, which is really important because low maintenance is the name of the game when you have young kids. It includes more than red light though, as it has 8 different wavelengths, including NIR to tackle signs of aging and other skin concerns. To use it, you just press the button on the top and it turns on, and then you can change the LED colors by quick pressing the button again. And with the FAQ 202, you can access more settings and pre-programmed treatments on their app. Since using this mask, I've noticed my skin feeling smoother and less dull, so if you would like to check out the FAQ 202 or other Foreo bestsellers, click the link in the description and don't forget to use my code EMBERS35. This code also applies to already discounted items, bringing the total discount up to 50%. So I feel like I need to backtrack a little bit and talk about what even is an ultra-processed food, because it's a bit of an ambiguous definition. See, processed foods exist on a spectrum ranging from minimally processed to heavily processed. An example of this is fruits and veggies. You wouldn't think to call them processed foods, but the second you cut them up for your toddler, they've technically been processed. And moving down that line of processing, we have things like yogurts. Still natural, but the milk from the cow has been processed to create a new food for us. And the way we get all the way to ultra-processed foods is when the original ingredients have been turned into something so far gone from the original state that it's not recognizable by its underlying ingredients. One definition I found says ultra-processed foods are those that have been industrially produced and contain ingredients not typically found in a home kitchen, like emulsifiers, preservatives, and artificial colors and flavors. The broad category includes items like soda, instant noodles, and chips, as well as less obvious foods like flavored yogurts and commercially prepared whole grain breads. These foods are really just concoctions of engineered food-like substances that are whipped together into something appealing with the help of additives and emulsifiers.
I'm sorry, but why are we as a country like this? I got this salmon from Trader Joe's. I didn't get wild salmon this time because it was a little bit more expensive, and I'm going out of town halfway through the week, so I didn't know for sure if I was going to be able to cook it, so I just went for the cheaper option. I know should have always gone for the Alaskan salmon, but I just didn't this time. Looking at the ingredients, Atlantic salmon color added. This is the second salmon that I've gotten in the past 2 months that has had color added. Why do we need to be adding color to this? I don't need you to add color to my salmon for me to eat it. Like, Why do we need to do this?
And it turns out that the almond moms might have been onto something with the whole if I can't read the ingredient, then I'm not eating it mindset, because that is a signifier of UPF as well. If you see any food on a nutrition label that you wouldn't have in your pantry or fridge, things like palm oil or xanthan gum, then it's an ultra-processed food. But I do want to take a moment to go on a quick trip of the history of food and how it went from Adam and Eve picking apples on a tree to blue heat Takis. So to start, as mentioned, the second we alter our food, it becomes processed. And so food processing has been a part of our history as long as we've been around. But over the past 100 years specifically, the way we buy, cook, and even think of food has changed dramatically. With the Industrial Revolution came alongside a food revolution in how it's manufactured, marketed, and eaten. In the 1920s, most of what people ate would have been fresh, unprocessed, and locally grown. But change was underway, and by the time 1924 came around, the process that enabled the frozen food industry was invented. And while frozen fruits and vegetables are definitely healthy, it was just the starting point of reshaping the US diet. When supermarkets came on the scene, we had more sale opportunities for processed foods, and so came things like factory-made sliced bread, as well as the man, the myth, the legend, boxed macaroni and powdered cheese. Since then, processed foods have been a way of life for us, as motivation of market competition drives further innovations in food science to increasingly complicate our food. And with that, of course, came the never-ending push to increase profits by decreasing costs and increasing our consumption.
One thing I learned after having kids, literally 90% of all kids' stuff is completely unnecessary. And you just have to remember how human beings lived for thousands, tens of thousands of years without all of this modern shit. Yeah, I mean, it's just our capitalist society and, trying to create the need. And that is the perfect thing for a corporation, to create a need.
And this is the reason why half the ice cream at the grocery store doesn't actually say cream or dairy on them. And if left in the summer heat, they won't actually melt, but rather maintain a gelatinous, non-Newtonian fluid state. Because it's way cheaper to use non-dairy products, and it's more reliable for transportation and storage purposes if the ice cream you sell doesn't actually melt. On the topic of ever-changing food ingredients, I often hear and even think myself, well, I grew up with these processed foods and I was fine. But the thing is, these foods are never fixed and are always up for modification if cheaper alternatives come about. As long as they maintain customer satisfaction, then there's no reason for them to not be constantly increasing profit margins as capitalism requires. A popular example of this is the fact that McDonald's French fries used to be potato, salt, and beef tallow, and now the ingredients include potatoes, a concoction of vegetable oil, dextrose, sodium acid, pyrophosphate, salt, and natural beef flavor, but apparently they're still vegetarian somehow. I didn't want to get into it. And there are so many examples of this, as most of the processed food we ate as children has changed so much from the original ingredients that it's not even comparable. And this is a problem because the era of industrialized food abundance does come with consequences. So not only is most of the baby food aisle made up of these ultra-processed products, but these foods are also heavily marketed as harmless and healthy, when the vast majority, 78% of foods with packaging that appeals to children is unhealthy. And I don't know if this is actually the term for it, but I'll be calling it health washing, because it's essentially the same thing as greenwashing, but for health foods. If you don't know, greenwashing is when companies use packaging and marketing in a way to make their products look more environmentally friendly and non-toxic, even if they're not. So as the name suggests, a lot of these products have green packaging to give them a good for the planet feel, despite them having, say, forever chemicals in them. But we also see this tactic with health washing, especially in the kids aisle, as these companies are desperately trying to make their ultra-processed food look healthy enough for parents to put in the cart.
All right, let's have a little lesson in greenwashing, okay? So I had a very kind neighbor say, "Here, do you want these for the girls?" And I said, "Oh, no, thank you. We don't do sugary drinks." And he said, "Oh, they're not." So I came closer and he said, "See, they're organic and no sugar added." And I was like, "Oh, okay, great." So I took them. He doesn't know, and that's okay. They're greenwashing us by saying organic, 35 calories per box, no added sugar. Sounds great, right? Let's read the ingredient label. First is filtered water, fine. Then we have organic apple juice from concentrate. What does that mean? It means that the juice is boiled down to a concentrate, all of the nutrients are removed, and all you are left with is a sugary syrup. It might be better than Kool-Aid. It's still not helping our children, it's hurting them.
If you've ever walked down the baby toddler food aisle, you'll know that you are bombarded with a snacktopia with brightly colored cartoon faces and health claims stamped on every corner of packages. Things like gluten-free, natural flavors, and no added sugar, to name a few. The thing is, usually these claims don't actually mean that the food is healthy. As found here, some phony fruit snacks don't contain any fruit promised on the labels. For example, in the illustration below, Annie's Summer Strawberry Organic Bunny Fruit Snacks are made only with organic white grape juice concentrate and no strawberry, despite the product's name. And I actually hated learning that because I felt so betrayed by Annie. Manufacturers have done a spectacular job of convincing many parents that feeding a baby with highly processed pouches, powders, and crisp-like snacks is not just the convenient option, but the healthier and better one. Does your baby refuse greens? A pouch will provide all the veg they require. Worried about your child choking? Give them a melty snack. But it's actually crazy that this is the common practice to false advertise this sort of health halo around unhealthy products. But nowhere is it more abundant than in the downplaying of sugar content in our kids' foods. In recent analysis of 469 conventional baby foods in the US, 35% contained more than 10 grams of total sugar in a 4-ounce single-serve jar or pouch. As a point of comparison, a regular-sized Snickers bar has 20 grams of sugar. To take this further, we all know that sugar in its natural state is the healthiest for us, like eating an apple versus eating a chocolate bar. But just because something uses natural sugars from a fruit doesn't mean that it's good for you. There was a study done to show this, where a small group of scientists back in 1977 fed 10 people apples in 3 different forms: apple juice without any pulp, raw whole apple smoothie, and whole chunks of apple. They made participants eat everything at the same speed and then measured fullness, blood sugar, and insulin in response to the 3 different apple preparations. What they found was that both the juice and the puree caused blood sugar and insulin levels to spike higher than the whole apple. The whole apple made blood sugar rise slowly before it returned to the baseline level. No crash, and the fullness from the whole apple lasted hours. So according to this study at least, it seems that while fiber is important, the structure of the fiber is what's more important. Meaning that all of these kid snacks with added real fruit juice and added fiber are indeed not a replacement for real fruit in its whole form, and potentially aren't any better than giving your kid a lollipop to suck on, in regards to sugar take anyway. But one of the reasons this health halo has become so prevalent is that there aren't really any government regulations dictating what can or cannot be portrayed as healthy. The Food and Drug Administration regulates terms that food companies use on their packaging, defining the criteria by which companies can use phrases such as low fat, low calorie, and more. However, the definition of the term healthy hasn't been updated since 1994, when any food labeled healthy was decided to have limits for total fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, and sodium. Under these definitions, foods widely regarded as nutritious, olive oil, nuts, salmon, and avocado, could not be labeled as healthy. And so businesses are under no obligation to actually prioritize children's health and well-being over profits when there's no incentive or regulation to do so. And it's such a weird thing to navigate as a parent, because a lot of the time we know that most of these foods aren't the healthiest, but we're also not in that aisle necessarily looking to prioritize health. We're looking for convenience. And so when we're grabbing the food, we will subconsciously pick the healthiest looking option because obviously, but also because we don't have the capacity to actually sit there and do the research on each food item when our kids are screaming at us. So we just pick whatever looks best. So what is so unique about UPFs, and why are they so relevant in our lives? Well, because they're addictive, obviously. I mean, I don't really have to explain to you that it's hard to eat more than one chip. Has anyone ever had only one chip? But these companies have been working on their food engineering for decades now, and the competition is tough. So they have to pull out the big guns trying to convince us to eat their product. And the best tool for doing this is making their food so irresistible that you keep coming back for more. Dr. Marion Nestle said that the abundance of food in the US means corporations have to work harder than ever to sell it. So they're efforts are frequently focused on making their products irresistibly delicious and in larger portions. Economics dictate that manufacturers emphasize not wellness but profits. Food companies are not social service or public health agencies. And so every aspect of a UPF is meticulously engineered to optimize the experience. The classic example being the Pringle, with its moon-shaped chip perfectly designed to caress the roof of your mouth and your tongue at the same time. The ingredients of the Pringle achieve the bliss point of flavor, which is the precise combination of sugar, fat, and salt, making a food maximally palatable and giving an explosion of flavor that isn't too much of anything. And of course, when you actually crunch down on it, the potato starch quickly breaks into a mush that can be passed through the esophagus just in time for your hand to reach back in the bag for the next one. It's really weird when you take a second to think through the process like that, but this is pretty much the universal experience with any ultra-processed food.
The reason kids love chicken nuggets is because they're part of something that feeding therapists often refer to as the beige diet. Chicken nuggets don't have a strong smell, flavor, or color. That's really appealing to kids who have sensory sensitivities around food. Because chicken nuggets are a processed food, they're much more easy to eat. They overall just require less strength in the jaw and the mouth to chew and swallow that food.
And besides the process of eating being seamless, they also do that lovely thing of hitting our brain's reward system just right to make us come back for more. Eating UPFs causes dopamine to spike, making us feel great. It then crashes, making us feel terrible. We crave the return of the good feeling, so we eat more UPFs. Dopamine spikes are similar to those caused by alcohol and nicotine, and the resulting addiction levels are almost identical too. So it's really not an exaggeration to call these foods addictive when they do the same thing to our brains that smoking does in keeping us crawling back for more.
I have this theory a lot of people are probably not going to like about ultra-processed food addiction. I keep up with the news a lot, especially food and nutrition news, and there's always new things that are coming out. And I'm always asking myself, like, why do we need more flavors of Oreos? Why do we need protein that tastes like Skittles or a cinnamon bun? And my theory is that just like drugs, where people need to find new ways to get more of a high, the same thing goes with ultra-processed foods. A chocolate protein shake isn't going to cut it when I can get something that tastes like pancake syrup. Why have a regular chocolate chip cookie when you can have a crumble cookie that tastes like pumpkin pie with cheesecake frosting? Why have a regular soda when you can have one that's crossed with an Oreo? People are destroying their taste buds where they can't even enjoy the taste of plain water.
And with that, a lot of the time we're not eating UPFs for the calories, but to change our mood and get a hit of pleasure, to feel less stressed, or just to reduce our feeling of boredom. But even if we lose the joy from the food we're consuming, the addiction in us keeps us eating in hopes that we'll get another hit of the good stuff. In preparation for this video, I read the book Ultra Processed People by Dr. Chris Van Tolken? And in it, he went on an exclusive UPF diet for a month to see what it would do to his body. During this process, he shares how eating UPF cereal affected him, saying that the first spoonful was ecstatic for both of us. The cereal is rich, complex, and intensely chocolatey, far more so than I remembered. The texture of the first mouthful is extraordinary. Some of the pops become chewy almost instantly, while others remain crisp, crackling on the tongue. But 3 spoons in and the joy was gone. What remained was a brown sludge, consumed only to relieve a craving. Lyra and I drawn to our next mouthfuls just like smokers to the next drag. The experience of the first pull couldn't be replicated, yet something about the cereal made us keep trying. Point being that the reward system goes into hyperdrive when we eat these foods, and often we don't know how to stop. So now let's finally get into the problems of UPF, because you've probably been waiting for me to get to it already. Well, in regards to the irresistibility of it, these foods are leading to an overconsumption of calories. There's this idea with eating healthy that you just need to have better self-control, but it's a bit of a losing battle. Our brains are up against foods that our bodies have not evolved to handle, and so we overeat without even thinking about it.
When we start talking about the diets of children, people can get very defensive, and the first thing that they say is, well, junk foods are good in moderation. And I wouldn't argue against that point, but what I think we have to acknowledge is that most people are not actually moderating it. There is no moderation happening. There is no actual balance between ultra-processed foods and whole foods.
And there have been multiple studies showing this, that even on diets with the same ingredients, ultra-processed foods lead to overeating. On the gray tinned ultra-processed diet, people ate an average of 500 calories more per day than those on the unprocessed diet. And they gained weight in line with that. Perhaps even more surprisingly, participants actually lost weight when they were on the unprocessed diet, even though they could eat as much as they liked. It wasn't that the UPF was more delicious either. There was some other quality beyond deliciousness that was driving the UPF group to overeat. One of the reasons for this is the taste being addictive, but also because the food is so soft. This is specifically a problem because we're ingesting more food so fast that our gut can't communicate quickly enough to our brains that we're actually full.
I'm just realizing how capitalism has crept into every single crevice. A huge reason we developed processed food is because it's quicker to eat it, right? Like you can't in 5 minutes chow down on a bowl of kale, but you can eat a protein bar. And I was thinking about this because I was really starving at work today, but I only had a 10-minute break because I was working a 5-hour shift, and I was like, oh my God, I'm starving. And I was like, I genuinely don't have time to eat anything healthy or nourishing or that has fiber in it. So I went to 7-Eleven, got like a sausage roll and a chocolate bar because I was like, oh my God, I'm starving. I need like a maximum calories. We have made it so food is easier to chew, easier to bite, less bites per swallow, because time is of the essence when it comes to making money, when it comes to capitalism. That's crazy.
They say food intake is less under our conscious control than we think, and is more along the same lines as our control of breathing and drinking. And it's hard to limit our food intake, just as it's hard to limit our air intake or our water intake if that's what our body is telling us that we need. Our drive to eat is based on complex systems where there's a dialogue between our organs telling us what to eat, when to eat, and how much to eat. The new UPF food environment is affecting our ability to self-regulate. And indeed, while exactly how our current food system breaks or bypasses our evolved method of regulating weight is unknown, an increasing number of studies have shown that every aspect of UPF disrupts our multi-million-year-old network of regulatory neurons and hormones. And now it's even theorized that with UPFs being so soft, they're absorbed too quickly and don't reach the part of the gut that sends the signal to stop eating. As a result, we keep eating beyond necessity. The other speculated reason why we can't stop eating UPFs, I think, is a really interesting one. So for the longest time, we saw human food consumption as being consciously controlled, right? But there have been research studies showing that the body actually craves food based on nutrient deficiencies. And this seems kind of wild to think about, that if you're craving pickles, it's because you're depleted in whatever pickles have. But it makes sense in that humans have existed for thousands of years without having a nutritionist tell us what we need to eat. Somehow we've managed and figured it out. The first study done on this was actually done in the 1920s, funny enough, by pediatrician Clara Marie Davis. Her study was to see what would happen if infants were allowed to choose their own food from a selection of wholesome, unprocessed options with no adult influence or encouragement. Over time, the children seemed to instinctively balance their diets, compensating for prior deficiencies and illnesses. For example, one child had a case of rickets, which comes from prolonged vitamin D or calcium deficiency. And what they found was that, bound by a promise to do nothing or leave nothing undone to his detriment, we put a small glass of cod liver oil on his tray for him to take if he chose. This he did irregularly and in varying amounts until his blood calcium and phosphorus became normal, and X-ray films showed his rickets to be healed, after which he did not take it again. Isn't that wild? And it wasn't until literally a century later, in 2022, when this study was reinforced by Jeffrey M. Brunstorm, as he found in his experiment of 128 adults. For the first time in almost a century, we've shown humans are more sophisticated in their food choices and appear to select based on specific micronutrients rather than simply eating everything and getting what they need by default. And here's how this ties back to ultra-processed foods. Our bodies are naturally wired to guide us toward the nutrients we need, right? But the UPFs interrupt that process. They're designed to mimic flavors of real food, but without actually delivering the nutrients that those flavors usually signal. So when we eat them, our bodies expect to get nourishment from them, but it never arrives. This creates a kind of endless loop where our gut keeps sending hunger signals to search for the missing nutrients, so you keep eating in hopes that the next bite will deliver, but it doesn't because you're eating Doritos. And so it goes on. And that is speculated to be a huge factor into why we can't stop eating UPFs once we start. Such an interesting idea. Again, I'm the furthest thing from a doctor, but these are the things that I've read online, okay? So now on to the most fun part, which is the health effects and why it's important to regulate our children's intake of UPFs. Well, for one, they are horrible for dental health. The fact that they taste so good and are addictive means that kids are eating way more sugar than they should, and it's affecting their oral health. In 2022, the British Dental Association attacked pouches for putting baby teeth at risk of erosion and decay just as they are erupting. Most of the pouches have small print on the back advertising that the contents should be squeezed into a bowl or onto a spoon before being offered to babies. Now, while dental health overall has improved over the centuries thanks to medical advancements, that doesn't mean that there isn't an epidemic of cavities in kids today. Based on recent data, 18% of children ages 2 to 5 and 45% of children ages 6 to 11 in the US population are affected by tooth decay. The issue is not just that many kids have caries, it's also that many kids have untreated caries. And UPFs affect the mouth beyond tooth decay in that children's bone structure is also suffering. Because most of the food presented as for kids is soft, easy to eat, and requires almost no effort to chew, we're now facing the modern issue of underdeveloped jaws. Because despite the thought that bones are innate structures, they are living and can grow, and it's tough, fibrous foods that are actually what help build facial structure. So basically, kids aren't chewing enough. Evidence from skulls show that pre-industrial farmers who were eating increasing levels of carbohydrate have plenty of cavities and dental abscesses, but fewer than 5% have impacted wisdom teeth compared with 70% of modern populations. And the effects of this include poor teeth structure growing in, poor sleeping habits, as well as an effect on speech. There has been a massive increase in toddlers with tooth decay, as well as a rise in the number of children reaching the age of 3 who are more or less nonverbal. This speech delay is attributed to the fact that the skills and muscles needed for chewing are related to those for speech. Yikes. The other problem going on here is that UPFs are also creating bad eating habits because kids aren't getting exposed enough to real food. If a child is only offered soft, uniform, palatable foods, then when they eventually get offered real food that has texture, variation, and inconsistencies, they'll reject it, which leads to picky eaters. This new generation of infants just don't seem to like texture. In the most extreme cases, Smith and her staff found themselves feeding 3-year-olds who vomit at the very sight of a cooked lunch. Smith says it was a normal part of nursery life to have children who struggled with certain vegetables or ones who liked dry food but not wet food. The difference now, Smith says, is that the nursery is seeing a lot of 3-year-olds for whom follow-on milk plus commercial baby food and other packaged snacks form 100% of their diet. And the food habits we establish as kids stick with us as life goes on, maybe not exactly the same, but will stick with us nevertheless. While it's normal to start liking more bitter flavors as we grow older, if we formed a life around ultra-processed food when we're children, then we're more likely to stay in that category as adults.
Did y'all know that the younger we are when we are exposed to an addictive substance, the more likely we are to become addicted and stay addicted through adulthood? It changes our neural pathways, it narrows them, it inhibits certain brain development. And many studies show that ultra-processed foods are equivalent to other highly addictive substances.
Finally, and most dramatically, ultra-processed foods have been shown to lead kids down the path to obesity as overeating is inevitable. Researchers found that at age 3, on average, these children were getting nearly half their daily energy intake from ultra-processed foods. They also found that by age 5, kids who consumed these foods had higher body fat measurements and an almost 20% increased risk of living with overweight or obesity. For both children and adults, the link between ultra-processed food and high BMI is undeniable and unsurprising after everything we've talked about today. And if you're wondering what happened to Dr. Chris in ultra-processed people, well, he gained 17 pounds and said that if he continued on this diet, he would expect his weight to have doubled after a year. Yeah. Okay, final thoughts. So what are we supposed to do with all this information? Well, our best. We're supposed to do our best. I had a bit of a turning point with this whole diet culture after watching so many documentaries, as I said. But the thing that I found was that no matter what diet they were on, they all ended up having the same outcome of living a healthier life and reducing any health complications that they had, whether they were keto, vegan, or fruitarian, which sounds like that's not possible because they all are doing opposite diets. But the thing is that when these diets become popularized, there's usually not a lot of UPF versions of these foods, so people are forced to just eat real food. And so my interpretation of all this is that we really just need to be eating real food, meat, veggies, and fruit, and starches too, as long as it's like real food, and we'll be fine. As for our kids though, I don't think all of this means that you cut them off completely from UPFs, which might sound super odd after everything we went through, but I personally would rather still introduce these foods because this is the world we live in. Obviously, it would be better if our kids didn't eat any of it, but I feel the consequences of shielding them from it are worse because it can create food fears that change their perception of food as they grow older, and can also lead to food binging when they're old enough to buy their own food because all of a sudden they have access to this whole category of really tasty, delicious stuff that they were never allowed to have. I just don't think it's practical to think that if you're living in a modern world, you can just cut out the UPFs and your children will be fine. I don't know, prove me wrong, but I think there might be some mental health struggles that come along with that. So what it looks like for my family anyway is we don't buy many UPFs at all. I'm like calculating in my brain. I'm sure we have some. Oh yeah, Josh just bought some Annie's because we're going on a trip and we want some easy meals. So like, it's fine. But we usually don't bring ultra processed foods into our house, but we don't prevent our kids from having it either. So if they're at a friend's house, they can eat whatever they're having. If we go to the movie theater, we're still gonna get popcorn. I want them to be exposed to these foods, but also build that palate of real food as well. And the main priority being of fostering a healthy relationship with food. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video. And if you're interested, make sure you subscribe for more videos like this. Also check out my merch. All the proceeds get donated to the SA Foundation. And I wish you a week of healthy food shared with the people you love. Bye.
Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that?